When me and Deacon Steve and Father Corey and myself got together about a month ago, we started to talk about what we wanted to do at this Spring Sunday, how we wanted to approach this. And I think one of the things we said we wanted to talk about, our own story and how we got, basically how we have our own devotion to the Sacred Heart. And you heard Father's story and how beautiful that was. And as he said, I was first ordained in December 14, 2012. My first assignment was in Menominee, and me and Deacon Steve were going around doing First Fridays, bringing communion to the shut-ins and so forth. And one day he just asked me, do you want to go and do a home enthronement? And I asked him to explain it to me. He did a pretty good job considering who the source was. I'm explaining it to me. And so I said, sure, I'll see what it's like. And I went, and I was very impressed. I was very impressed with the prayerful attitude that him and Jackson had, the things that they were saying, and just how family-oriented it was and stuff. It really caught my heart. And so I asked for a book to read, and I think Jackson gave me one of her books to read, and I read through that, and I was really drawn into this. I really loved how the Sacred Heart was. You can see how that same love of the Sacred Heart was passed on. You can see kind of into this, and then they kind of got me into this. So you can see the evangelization aspect of the Sacred Heart of Jesus too, and how it kind of brings more and more people that love how it just goes from one person to another. But I think it starts much further back than this for me and the devotion to the Sacred Heart. Because my grandpa Flynn, had a very strong devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And I never knew my Grandpa Flynn. My Grandpa Flynn died, I think he was around 48 by the time? 47 years old when he died. And my mother and father had just been married a few years. They had one child, it was Teresa, and she was pregnant with Christina, the second, who died a couple of hours after her birth. So it was a very small family at that time. They were fairly young, in their early 20s at the time when he died. But he had a very strong devotion to the Sacred Heart. He used to carry around in his wallet this picture, like a laminated picture of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And every time he'd open his wallet up, he would kiss that picture as a sign of devotion, a sign of love to Jesus and the Sacred Heart. He had a real love for Christ, a real love for the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And he would carry that around with him, and every time he'd open his wallet, he would kiss that picture. And when he passed away, my father took that picture and he put it in his wallet. And he began to carry it in his wallet. And I'm sure most of you guys know that in August of last year, we were out camping. He was out camping and he had a stomach ache, a real severe stomach ache. They brought him to Marquette General, and I'm assigned here at the cathedral, so I went over there and I sat with my mother for a few hours waiting for the results to come back. We figured it was a gallbladder or something like that. And it came back and they gave him a 2-month diagnosis. They gave him 2 months to live. And me and my mother were just like sitting there shocked. We didn't expect 2 months. It was just didn't really know what to say. We were just so shocked. So late October, he took a turn for the worst. It was about 3 months after the diagnosis. And we started to gather together as a family. We all gathered at my parents' house, my brothers and my sisters, my brother-in-laws and my sister-in-laws. And we all came together, and my brother-in-laws, sister-in-laws, everyone, like nieces and nephews. There was many, many people there for 3-4 days we got together. It was just such a beautiful time to be able to be with the family going through this dying process, because death can be a beautiful thing when a person is close to God. It was just a real beautiful thing to be there. I said Mass every day at the house. We prayed the Rosary a couple times together as a family. We prayed the Divine Mercy Chaplet a couple times a day. We cried. We told stories. We laughed. We played. It was just almost like a retreat, being there for those 3 or 4 days with my family all around us, and it cemented us together. The Flynn family is very close, but after this, we became even closer after this time. I think it was around like the third day of this ordeal, maybe the second evening, third day, I kind of lose track. But when we were kind of losing track, I kind of lost track of time a little bit, I guess. But most of the people had went home. There was me, Dave, my brother, and Mike. And most of the people weren't actually home. They were in hotel rooms close by or other people's homes, because in case something happened, they could come back. And my dad, in the evening, he made it clear that he didn't want to sleep in his hospital bed, that he wanted to sleep in his regular bed next to my mother. You know, he spent 55 years sleeping next to her, and I think he was saying he thought this was his last day. If he thought this is my last day on earth, I'm going to spend it with her. I think he wanted to spend every last moment he could with her. It was just such a beautiful example of marital love, how much he loved her and how much he wanted to spend every last hour he had with her. And so me and my two brothers kind of almost carried him into the bedroom. And he just barely shuffled his feet to walk. And it took a long time to get him into the bed, but getting him there literally almost killed him. It almost killed him to get him that 35 feet to the bedroom. And he was laboring to breathe. His complexion was changing. It looked like he wasn't going to make it. Me and Dave and Mike saying, you know, should we start calling people? Should we get more people here? Because I don't think he's going to make it much longer. And so we were discussing that. And a few hours later, I think it was, as my brother Mike was standing there by his bed, and he just said, I can see Jesus and Mary standing at the foot of my bed. And they have their arms open like this. They have their arms open, you know, like welcoming him. And I was just thinking about that. I didn't really piece it together at the time. I was thinking about that fourth promise that we're going to be talking about later. You know, it talks about how Jesus will be your Sacred Heart will be your refuge in life, and especially at the hour of your death. How God will be there. He'll be your refuge at the hour of your death. And he kept that promise. Jesus was actually there for him. And Mother Mary, her Immaculate Heart, Jesus and his Sacred Heart, they were there. You ever see that picture that he had in his wall? He had his arms open like this, just like that same thing in that picture. You know, and I didn't really even know anything about this. I didn't even know this. I mean, I knew about, you know, him seeing this and all that stuff. But I mean, about the Sacred Heart. I was sitting with my mother. It was Sunday. The funeral home had come. They had taken my father's body. And me and my mother were the only ones left in the house, and we're sitting there talking. And as we were talking, she was going through this Bible. She's going through his wallet, and she comes upon this picture of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And she asked me, do you want this? And she begins to telling me the story about this Sacred Heart, and how my father-in-law carried this in his wallet, and how my father carried this in his wallet for like 50 years, you know, carrying on that love, that devotion to the Sacred Heart. And now she said, do you want it? And I said, well, yeah. So I put that in my wallet, and I carry that around. So that picture of the Sacred Heart has been in a Flynn wallet for at least 75 years now. And I was telling Benny that, you know, when I get old enough, I'm going to give it to him, and so we can pass it on to another Flynn, and hopefully that chain of love for the Sacred Heart continues to be passed on from one person to another to another. So you can see how I received graces from my grandpa that I didn't even deserve. I received graces from my father. See how that passes on from family, how it really affects the family. See how the Sacred Heart of Jesus really affects the family? I mean, I didn't even know this, and I was getting graces from my grandpa's love for the Sacred Heart. And he says, in the Home and Throne, we have a scripture passage, Deuteronomy 7:9, where it talks about, if you love me and you keep my covenant of love with you, I'll keep my covenant of love with you to 1,000 generations. 1,000 generations he will keep his covenant of love with us. And we can see that passed on from one person to another to another. And as we said, I think Father Porter said this, you can't outgive God. You can't outgive God in our generosity. You can't outgive God in our material possessions. You can't outgive God in our love. When we love God, it opens us up to receive more. And then we love him again, it opens up to receive more and more. It's like this continual cycle of growing in love of him. Devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus is at the very heart of Christianity, for it's about loving Christ. Devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus is a devotion to Christ himself and his threefold love for us. His divine love, his human love, and his sensible love. His threefold love that he has for us. He loves us with this Trinitarian love. He loves us with a love that created the whole universe. He loves us with a love that created the world. He loves us with that generous love, that self-giving love that created us simply out of love. He didn't really need us. He created us out of love. But he loves us with a human love, too. We know from our faith that Jesus is true God and true man, right? True God, true man. He has a human intellect. He has a human will. He has a divine intellect. He has a divine will in one person, and that one person is divine. but he truly has a human intellect and a human will. And he loves us with that human intellect, and he loves us with that human will. He chose to love you. He chose to die for you. He chose to die for me. He chose to die for each one of us. He chose to die for all of us, right? He chose to die for each one of us as if there was only one of us. He loves us all that much. That he actually said, I want to die for you. I want to take your sins upon myself. I want to freely go to the cross and lay down my life for each one of you. And he loves us with a sensible love. He loves us with that emotional love. You see in the scriptures, when he stood at the tomb of Lazarus and he cried. Or when he, with the feeding of the 5,000, he looks on this group of people, 5,000 people. He said his heart was moved with pity for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. His heart was moved with pity for them. If Deacon Steve, I don't know if he still has this, but on his email, when he sends you an email, if he sends you an email, my condolences, but sometimes he switches up. He has little Christian messages at the bottom of his emails. A couple of years ago, he got the second one that says, Jesus did not come to make God's love possible, but to make God's love visible. Jesus came to make God's love visible, not to make God's love possible. When we think of God's love, we think, where is God's love made most visible to us? Where is his love made most visible to us? I would have to say this in the Paschal mystery, right? In his passion, his death, his resurrection, his ascension to heaven. We see that. We look at all of human history. We say, if we could narrow it down to where his love is made most visible, we would say the Paschal mystery. In that Paschal mystery, his love is made most visible to us. And the Catechism says, the Paschal mystery is the one event in human history that never ends. It happened in time, but it transcends time and space. Even though it happened in history, it transcends time and history. So it's available to all generations. The Paschal mystery really never ends. The Paschal mystery is present and available to all of us. So we started looking at where God's love is made most visible. We said the Paschal mystery. Now if we started to narrow our gaze, we would say, where is it made most present in the Paschal mystery? We'd probably say on the cross. When Jesus was hanging on that cross for us, where he's dying, where he's that perfect self-gift for us, where he's laying down his life for us. But then if we narrowed that gaze even more, went in even further, we kind of focused in on where that love on the cross is made most visible. I think we looked at the cross and said, where is his love most visible? We would say it's right at the center of the cross. Right here in his sacred heart. Right at his heart. That is where his love is made most visible to us. In his sacred heart. As he's hanging upon the cross. And we know that when he was hanging on the cross, they came to him and they stuffed this lance into his side. It said blood and water flowed forth. The blood and water flowed forth. We know that he was already dead at this time, right? They checked him to make sure he was dead. They thrust this lance into his heart, into his side, into his sacred heart. So that shows us how God loves us. It shows us how God gives to us. That he holds absolutely nothing back. He gave every single last drop of blood for us. He held absolutely nothing back. He gave everything to us in that moment. As that blood and water flowed forth out of his pierced and sacred heart. You see, God gives everything for us. We could say in that Paschal mystery that everything in all of human history is pointing towards that moment of the Paschal mystery. Everything is like being drawn to that moment. At the exact same time, everything is receiving life from that moment, from that very moment of the Paschal mystery. Everything's being drawn to it. Everything's receiving life from it. So from that pierced heart, from that sacred heart of Christ, the church is born. From the pierced heart, the sacred heart of Jesus, all graces flow. From the pierced heart of Jesus, we are born anew. From the pierced heart flows the very lifeblood of the world, the very lifeblood of the church, the very lifeblood of all humanity, which makes the side of Christ a sort of gateway of all graces. And his heart is where them graces flow from. his pierced heart is where that grace is flowing. And every time that we go to Mass, the Paschal mystery is made present to us. Every time we go to Mass, the Paschal mystery is made present. Every time we go to Mass, the sacrifice of Calvary is represented. Not represented, it is represented for us. So if we say, where we go to Mass, right? We know that Jesus is present to us in many different ways at Mass, right? He's present to us in the people, the baptized believers who are there. He is present to us in the word that is read. He is present to us in the priest. But he's most present. He's present to us, you say, par excellence in its totality in the Blessed Sacrament. He is present to us in the Blessed Sacrament, body, blood, soul, and divinity. He is present to us in his totality. Everything that he is, he gives to us in the Blessed Sacrament. We receive that host, we receive Jesus. Not part of Jesus, not a little bit of Jesus. We receive Jesus Christ himself. Body, blood, soul, and divinity. That's what we receive. So when we say, where is Christ's love made most visible in the Mass? We would say it is in the Blessed Sacrament. It is in the Blessed Sacrament. In that Blessed Sacrament, all these graces flow to us. We could say, and it's not a stretch of the imagination, that everything is pointing towards the Blessed Sacrament. Everything is pointing towards the Eucharistic heart of Jesus. And at the same time, all graces are flowing from the Eucharist. At the same time, all graces are flowing to us from that pierced heart of Jesus, from the sacred heart of Jesus. So when we say that we receive Jesus Christ's body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Blessed Sacrament, we're receiving Christ himself in his totality, right? So we're receiving his sacred heart. When Jesus rose from the dead, he didn't leave his body behind. He didn't discard his body. It was a bodily resurrection. When he came back to his apostles, he came back to his glorified body. He had a glorified body. And the wounds were still on his hands, his feet, and his side. He tells St. Thomas, come, put your hand in my side. Stop disbelieving, but believe. And when Thomas comes into contact with his side, what does he do? He falls to his knees, and he says, my Lord and my God. He falls onto his knees, and he repents. He becomes a different man. See, when we come into contact with Christ, we come in contact with his heart. When we receive Jesus Christ in the Blessed Sacrament, we are receiving his sacred heart. We're receiving his sacred heart. Jesus came to the apostles, his heart was still pierced. When he comes to us in the Blessed Sacrament, he comes to us in body, blood, soul, and divinity, and that includes his sacred heart. As Father Corey was talking about so beautifully too, about St. John the Apostle, when he put his head upon the chest of Christ. He put his head upon his chest to feel the heart beating of Jesus, to feel that sacred heart beating. And at the same time he could feel that sacred heart beating, Jesus was holding himself in his hands and giving his heart to them. He was giving his heart to them at the very moment he was feeling his heart beating in his chest. To say that there's a connection between the Eucharist and the Sacred Heart of Jesus is really an understatement. You know, because they are one and the same. They're one and the same. You can't separate them. The Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Eucharist are one and the same. So all blessings flow from the pierced heart. All blessings flow from the Eucharistic heart of Jesus. The Eucharist is the very heartbeat of the church. The Eucharist is the very heartbeat of humanity. Without the Eucharist, without the Eucharistic heart of Jesus, we would flatline. We would no longer be alive. All the other sacraments of the church flow from the Eucharist. With it, it is the very center and the heart of the church. The Catechism 1407 says the Eucharist is the heart and the summit of the church's life. The source and summit of the Christian life. And the Blessed Sacrament contains in the Blessed Sacrament is contained the whole spiritual good of the church, namely Christ himself. Everything is being drawn to the Eucharist. Everything flows from the Eucharist. Our life is dependent upon Christ, and the Eucharist is Christ. If you think I'm exaggerating, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI said, it would be easier for the world to survive without the Son than the Eucharist. It would be easier for the world to survive without the Son than without the Eucharist. because we could not survive without Jesus. We need Christ. The Eucharist is Christ. It's not a symbol. It's not a sign. It's not some quasi-spiritual aspect of Jesus. It is Christ. It is totality. And that includes his sacred heart. So, when we think about Jesus Christ, what human person knows Jesus the best? I'll give you a clue. It begins with an M and ends with an Aaron. No one knows Jesus like Mary. No one knows the love of Jesus like Mary. Nobody knows the sacred heart of Jesus like the Immaculate Heart of Mary. No one knows the suffering of the pierced heart of Jesus like the pierced heart of Mary. Mary, that's why we call her the co-redemptrix. She was at the foot of the cross. She was so united to her son in every way that when his heart was pierced, hers was pierced. We call her co-redemptrix because she suffers with Christ in a very unique way. She suffers with Christ like nobody else ever has or will. And she knows how he suffers. And so she can take our sufferings and bring them to Jesus, purify them, make them more holy, make them, augment them, make them more powerful for us. So if no one knows the sacred heart of Jesus like Mary, no human person has ever experienced the fullness of Jesus' love like Mary. No human person has ever loved Jesus as perfectly and totally as Mary. She was without sin, original sin, or personal sin. She had a completely pure heart. No stain of sin. Her heart was immaculate. It was perfectly united to her son. There's many, many saints. St. John Eudes, we had a guy at the seminary who was a Eude. We used to tease him, we say he belonged to the Eudes colony. St. John Eudes and St. Louis de Montfort and many, many more saints always say, wherever Jesus is, there's Mary. Wherever Mary is, there's Jesus. You can't separate Jesus from Mary. You cannot separate Jesus from Mary. They're always together. You can't separate the Immaculate Heart of Mary from the Sacred Heart of Jesus. They're always united. They're always together. No one can. So we think about that. No Mary, no Jesus, right? And no Mary, you know Jesus. If you didn't have the Immaculate Heart of Mary, there would be no Sacred Heart of Jesus. Think of the fact that the Sacred Heart of Jesus was being formed right underneath the Immaculate Heart of Mary. It was being formed right there underneath his heart. And we know, too, from St. Louis de Montfort, whoever's done the consecration to Jesus through Mary and looked at St. Louis de Montfort, he talks about this peasant who brought the queen. She brought this queen an apple. And this is all the peasant had was this little apple. He said, "Can you bring this to the king for me?" And she says, "Yes." And so she takes it and she puts it on a silver platter and she brings it to the king. She makes it beautiful. She makes it more acceptable to the king. See, that's what Mary does with our prayers. That's what Mary does with our love. That's what Mary does with our sacrifices. That's what she does with our sufferings. We give them to her. She makes them more beautiful. She increases them. She augments them. She increases what we bring. I give my little bit of love, all I can do, so weak, sinful. I give her my little acts of love, and she augments them. She makes them more beautiful. She increases them and brings them and consoles the heart of Jesus for us. Isn't that amazing to think that she can do this for us? She gives our love, our sufferings, our reparations, and we can present them to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and help to console. How much time do we have? Okay. All right. So we see how connected the Immaculate Heart of Mary is to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and how they are always united. And everything that we bring to his mother goes to him, and she increases our prayers. Who doesn't need more prayers? She makes our love more beautiful. Who doesn't need or make his love look appear more beautiful or increase our love for Christ? She helps to increase our love for Jesus Christ. She gives our sacrifices more power. All she wants is to bring us closer to his Son. All she wants is us to love him more. She wants us to love him more. So now I'd just like to look at the heart itself, maybe explain some of these aspects of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. When we see, first thing I just see is, we always notice how that heart is at the center. Now, I was just thinking about this. This isn't something that is in the documentation or anything. I was just thinking, that heart at the center. And Jesus should always be at the center of our lives. Jesus is not one good thing among many. Jesus is at the center of our lives at all times. He should be there always at the center. You ever see those models and they have the sun all the time revolving around it? That's the way our life should be. Jesus is at the center. Everything else revolves around him. Everything revolves around him. If that's out of order, then your whole life is out of order. If your life is out of order, if you're not balanced correctly, what's going to happen? You're going to fall, right? If you're not balanced in your life, you are going to fall. You're going to fall into sin more often if Jesus is not at the center of our life. And we see the cross above the heart. And this, obviously, a lot of this, you can see, I'm just kind of stealing what he says. No copyrights here. What Deacon Steve in the video said, from the very moment of his incarnation, the cross was on his heart. The cross was always on his heart because you were always on his heart. You were always on his heart. And we see the crown of thorns around his heart. And I think it was Marty Mary when she was in adoration. Isn't it amazing that Jesus appeared to her in adoration all the time? Because isn't he truly there? And she asked him, why is the crown of thorns around your heart and not your head? And he said, because people's sins hurt my heart more than they do my head. And then we see the pierced heart. And I talked about the pierced heart of Jesus. I talked quite a bit about that and how that is that gateway, not the gateway, the gateway to the side, but this is where all those blessings flow. All the blessings flow from his pierced heart to us. And it shows us how he gives, and he doesn't hold anything back. He doesn't hold anything back from us. And what does that tell us about our life? That we should not hold anything back from him. That's the way that we should love. Not because someone loves us back, not because someone is difficult to love. We should love like Christ. We should be total self, pour ourselves out for him. Then we see the fire around the heart. And that fire that burns with love for us. He wants to set our hearts on fire with that same love. St. Margaret Mary, at one of the times that Jesus came to her, he came to her and his heart was just, his whole chest was like a stove just on fire. He took her heart and put it within his chest. And he put that heart back into her chest. And she said, I didn't even want to eat. I was so enraptured with his love. I couldn't even talk. I was so enraptured with his love. And he wants to do that really for us. He wants to set us on complete fire for his love. He wants to set us on fire for his love. He really does. But what happens when we go to communion? When we go to communion, that's really what's happening. Our heart and his heart, our soul, his soul are coming together. So why aren't we set on fire when we go to communion? Why don't we blaze, when we come back from communion? And I think Father Corey, again, hit it right on the head. It's because of sin. Never went out in the woods and tried to set a fire, make a fire when everything's wet. When you make a campfire, you're going camping, everything's wet. How hard it is to make a fire. Being like water to our soul and to our body. Mortal sin completely quenches, puts out that fire of God's love within our heart. Venial sin makes it so much harder for that fire to spread throughout our bodies, to make it more visible to other people. Every one of us, when we were baptized, we received that love of God, the fire of God's love within our soul. But in most people's lives, most Catholics' lives, it just sits there smoldering, just this little ember. It's not really doing anything. It's not spreading throughout our body. And a lot of times it's because our bodies are soaking wet with venial sin. And so it doesn't catch fire. It doesn't really catch fire. There was an exorcist from the Diocese of Minnesota, one of the dioceses in Minnesota. And he was talking, someone rang the doorbell, he came to the door to answer the door. And this guy who's a Baptist, he said, you don't know me, and I really don't know you, but I had a dream about you last night. He said, I had a dream, and you were carrying this big gold thing around in your hand. And then you set it on the altar. And all the people bowed down and started worshiping whatever was in that. And he said, but there was like these rays of fire coming out of that gold thing, out of the center of that gold thing. It was touching all the hearts of the people that were there. He said to this priest, do you have any idea what I'm talking about? But see, that's what prepares us to receive our blessed Lord in the sacrament. When we set before the Lord in adoration, when we pray, we do acts of charity, it dries us up. It makes us more combustible. When we sit before the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, the rays fall upon us, and He dry us and help us to be more combustible to that flame, His love, can set us on fire. And then we can go out into the world and help set the world on fire. You know, we really are supposed to be like little pyros for Christ, right? We're supposed to go out, you know, and set the world on fire. This is what happened in the early church, wasn't it? You see what happened in the early church? You had these men who had this, you know, vigor, they had this energy, they had this so much love for Christ. They weren't going to let anything stop them from studying the message of Christ. And because they had this great vigor, because they had this great love, they went out and they set the world on fire. They say that, you know, I heard one time when the past, a lot of times I think it falls on priests a lot. I'm just going to point the finger at where I think it belongs. In the last many years, I think there's been a lot of lukewarmness, even in the priesthood, I believe. And when there's lukewarmness in the priesthood, you know, think of what that does to the parishioners, right? I mean, I think of, there's a quote that says, if the pastor or the shepherd is on fire, the sheep will come to stay warm. If the shepherd is on fire, the sheep will come to stay warm. And that's one thing I just totally love about Father Corey. He is on fire. Totally on fire for God. And I'm not just saying this. Wherever he goes, he sets that fire. Wherever he goes, people come to Christ. Because they want to get close to him because he's on fire. They want to get close to that warmth. And it's not him, he knows that. It's because he surrendered his life to Jesus Christ. It's because I want Christ to be the center of my life. I want to give him everything. And when we do that, people notice. When we do that, that warmth, that glow comes out into the world. So we need to turn to Jesus. We need to turn to his sacred heart. In closing, I'd just like to say, just to have a quote from St. Margaret Mary. St. Margaret Mary, during Eucharist adoration, one time Jesus said to her, I thirst with such a terrible thirst to be loved by you in the most blessed sacrament. I thirst to be loved by you with a terrible thirst. I have this terrible thirst to be loved by you in the blessed sacrament. And I thought about that, and I thought about the woman at the well, and Jesus says to her, I thirst. He thirsts for each and every one of us. He thirsts for your love. He thirsts for my love. He thirsts for your love. Just like a parent thirsts for each one of their children's love, God, Jesus Christ, thirsts for every one of our love. Individual love that only you can give him. He thirsts for that love. And we can give him that love. We can console the heart of Jesus. It's like you can see talking about Veronica wiping the face of Jesus. We can console the heart of Jesus by our little acts of love. We can do little acts of love for Christ. We can set before the Blessed Sacrament and say, I pour out my love to you, Lord Jesus. Take this, console your heart. Let me ask you, do you think that Jesus knew every sin that would ever happen before it happened in human history? Yes. He's God, right? Yeah. He knew every sin. And so he knew the sins that I will commit 10 years from now. Also, and he could feel those sins, right? He could feel the effects of those sins. But he can also feel our love then, right? He can also be consoled by our love. And he can feel the effects of the sins, that means he can be consoled by our love. So what he asks us to do is to console his heart by doing these little acts of love. He's on the cross and says, I thirst. We can quench his thirst.